Take a moment to reflect on the last time you were sick. It could be physical sickness, perhaps mental sickness, or even some sort of spiritual infirmity. Now take a step back and imagine how you felt the last time you were sick. The fact is that when we are sick, we feel helpless and are in need. We need someone to take care of us, to take care of our physical needs and our other needs as well. And so sickness causes a lot of pain. But then once we are back to good health, we can reflect on the experience of our illness and see the struggles we had to go through to overcome this sickness. Now, I think from time to time, everyone can agree with the fact that we all need healing. Healing helps to relieve our pain and suffering. It could be physical healing, like when we injured ourselves, maybe playing sports or falling down the stairs, for example. It could be mental healing, where we get so tired after working on that long project and we need some time off to go on vacation to recharge. It could be even spiritual healing as well. And so if we talk about healing, we reflect on this idea of restoration, restoring our health from an unbalanced, from being diseased or being injured. Of course, healing could be any of these three: physical, mental, or spiritual. And so in the Gospel of St. Mark chapter 5, we see a couple of different stories on healing. The first part, for example, we see both a physical and a spiritual healing. But as we move on to the two stories in this very Gospel passage here, in the Gospel of St. Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43, we see that the first story is about the healing of the daughter of the synagogue official named Jairus. And the second is the healing of a woman who has been affected by a hemorrhage for 12 years. Now, notice the differences. Each person has a specific circumstance that they are dealing with. And as we reflect on these two different stories, pay attention to the one common theme that is present in both situations: the sense of helplessness of these two people here. And so notice the differences. One has status, one doesn't, which goes on to demonstrate to us that Jesus comes not to help a specific group of people, but for all people. And so then if we go deeper into the story, here I would like to share 4 important points for us to reflect further in this gospel passage. And as we notice too, this gospel passage is very unique and interesting. It's basically a story within the context of a larger whole, or another story, in other words. And so then let's get started. And also too, just a reminder to please remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel to receive weekly reflections on faith. Point number 1, a large crowd is following Jesus. Now, St. Mark paints an important image for us to understand here. Jesus is being followed by a large crowd. Now, why is that? Why do you think there's a large crowd following Jesus? Well, the evidence seems clear. Some are curious. They follow Jesus wherever he goes so that they can see the healing. Some follow Jesus to get something out of it, like healing, for example. There can be various different reasons and intentions for following Jesus, but as we see later on in the Gospels, when the journey becomes difficult, most will abandon Jesus. Now, there's this large crowd, and among the crowd, there are 2 who stand out: Jairus and the woman suffering from hemorrhages, which then brings us to point number 2, the story of the synagogue official named Jairus. Now, if we zero in on this story, we notice that from among the large crowd, we see Jairus. Now, here's something interesting. He's a synagogue official, which means he would have status among the people. Here's what the gospel description says. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come lay your hands on her that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. Now, again, Jairus has status, but he recognizes the limit of his status and authority, namely that his authority extends only to those who are subjected to him. In fact, those who were close to Jairus told him that the situation is basically hopeless. They explained that his daughter has died and that there is nothing more that can be done. Here's what the passage says. While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid. Just have faith." And so take a look here. Does Jairus accept the fact that is presented to him, that his daughter has died and that he should not trouble the teacher any longer? The important point to pay attention to is this. Jesus didn't just heal the little daughter of Jairus. Jesus raised her from the dead. And the story within the story, which we mentioned earlier, makes this whole scene dramatic. The woman suffering from hemorrhages came to Jesus for physical healing. And in the midst of all of this, Jairus came to Jesus also to seek healing, but for his daughter, or rather that his daughter be raised from the dead. And so the key point to the story of the healing of Jairus' daughter is to illustrate that religious leaders during the time of Jesus also have faith. Jairus, who is a synagogue official, has already believed in Jesus, and his faith is reinforced even when he witnessed the miracles that Jesus does for his daughter. And so this is really important. Jairus' faith is reinforced, which then brings us to point number 3. We now shift our attention to the story about the woman affected with a hemorrhage for 12 years. Now, who is this woman? Well, notice that she is not named in the gospel at all, but you can imagine that this woman has been suffering for 12 years. She has tried everything, but has not received the healing she needs. And so she is desperate for healing. This woman believed that Jesus could heal her. She knows that Jesus is able to cure her and that she willingly does everything she can to come to Jesus to touch his cloak. Take a look at the image, the description of this story. Here's what it says. There's a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." And immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. This story of the woman with the hemorrhage demonstrates great faith on the part of the woman who has tried everything, but nothing worked. She was on the point of giving up. She's losing hope, but she did not lose faith. She hung in there in her suffering, and Jesus healed her, which then brings us to the fourth and final point I'd like to share in this reflection here. That the need for healing and the need to have faith. So the need for healing and the need for faith. You see, these two stories on healing, which we just noted, serve to illustrate one very important point, and that is faith. Earlier in this reflection, we referenced the fact that this gospel passage is basically about a story within another story, and that these two stories come together into one. Well, consider this. If Jairus did not have faith, would he have sought out Jesus? Would he have asked Jesus to not just heal his daughter, but to raise her from the dead? And so consider this. If the woman suffering from the hemorrhage did not have faith, would she have searched for Jesus? Would she have looked out for Jesus? It's important for us to see this point here made clear. All right, this woman had faith, and she realized if she could only touch Jesus, that she would be healed. And so these are important questions for us to reflect in our own personal journey of faith. When we are going through a difficult time in our life, are we willing to turn to Jesus to seek the help and the healing that we need? You see, both Jairus and the suffering woman are a good example to us about faith, about having faith in Jesus. And it didn't matter whether they are a man or a woman. It didn't matter if they are wealthy or poor. Jesus does not show favor one over the other. And this is important to emphasize because during the time of Jesus, this would have been a big issue. The leaders of the time would have ignored a woman because of her social standing. And I bring this up because sometimes we don't turn to Jesus because we don't think we are worthy, or maybe because we are a sinner, or maybe because we think in our own mind that Jesus doesn't care about us. But the truth is this: Jesus loves everyone, and he's willing to heal all of us in our unique situation, in our unique circumstance. In an earlier gospel passage, we go back three chapters to chapter 2, verses 17, Jesus says, "Those who are well do not need a physician, but the sick do. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Friends, an important question for us to reflect on is this: are we willing in faith to come to Jesus? May God bless you.